I am making an Ancient Gear deck profile, mainly because I managed to get all their new cards from Legacy of Destruction. And Ancient Gear is just one of those decks that I absolutely love, just because a lot of my friends, back when I first started playing Ancient Gear, loved to use battle traps. And Ancient Gear all have a common effect of, or most of them, have a common effect of when they declare attacks, your opponent cannot activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step. But I will go ahead and start with the main deck. And starting off with the monsters, I play one copy of Ancient Gear Box. Ancient Gear Box has the effect that when it's added from your deck to your hand, or when it's added from your deck or graveyard to your hand, then you activate its effect to add an Ancient Gear monster from your deck to your hand. Or is it Earth Machine? Okay, you get to add an Earth Machine that has 500 attack or defense from your deck to your hand. And you will use that effect of Ancient Gear Box once per turn. Next, I play 3 copies of Dr. Valiant Crowler, or Ancient Gear Commander, as at least it would appear that was designed after Dr. Crowler, who was the GX character that played Ancient Gear. But Ancient Gear Commander, I have yet to play a single game with this deck, so pardon me by not knowing what they do, I don't have what they do memorized yet. So Ancient Gear Commander has the effect that you can send an Ancient Gear Golem from your deck, hand, deck, or face-up monster zone to the graveyard to immediately normal summon an Ancient Gear monster. And if you normal or special summon Ancient Gear Golem, you can special summon one Ancient Gear Golem from your hand or graveyard, ignoring summoning conditions. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard to place an Ancient Gear Continuous Trap in your hand, or from your hand face up on your field. You can only use this effect of Ancient Gear Commander once per turn. The main thing I like about this is that you're able to just Golem spam, which is kind of funny. And the main reason that it says ignoring summoning conditions is just because Ancient Gear Golem has the effect of it cannot be special summoned. And then next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Tanker. Ancient Gear Tanker has the effect of, if it's normal or special summoned, you can special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your hand, except for Tanker, ignoring its summoning conditions. Or if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon from your graveyard instead. And then you can target one face-up card you control, destroy it. Also, for the rest of this turn, all monsters you control that are Ancient Gear Golem or mention it gain 600 attack. You can only use each effective Ancient Gear Tanker once per turn. The main thing is with this is just that it lets you get more bodies in play for link shenanigans, fusion shenanigans, whatever you'd want. Then I play 1 copy of Ancient Gear Frame. Ancient Gear Frame has the effect that you can discard a card to then add, Ancient Gear Golem or a card mentioning it from your deck to your hand. You can add one Ancient Gear Golem or a spell trap that specifically mentions Ancient Gear Golem from your deck to your hand. And the other part of its effect is hard to do, but mainly because it has to be triggered by your opponent, which is if this face-up card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can special summon up to 3 Ancient Gear Golem and or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound from your hand, ignoring their summoning conditions. But you're never going to be using that effect. The only thing you're really using it for is discarding it to add Ancient Gear Fusion. Or maybe an Ancient Gear Golem if you need one in your hand for some reason. But normally you'd want to add Ancient Gear Fusion. And then next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Wyvern. Ancient Gear Wyvern has the effect that when it's normal or special summoned, you can add an Ancient Gear card from your deck to your hand. And then if you use this effect, then you cannot set spells or traps for the rest of the turn. And then it also has the generic, if it attacks, your opponent can activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step, just like Frame. And then next, I play 2 copies of Ancient Gear Dark Golem. Dark Golem has the effect that its name becomes Ancient Gear Golem while in the field or in the graveyard. And if it's normal special summon, you can add up to 2 Ancient Gear cards and or Gear Talon from your deck to your hand, except for Dark Golem. Then you discard a card. And then you also cannot set cards for the rest of the turn. I'll use Structure 1 for me. And then if it attacks, your opponent cannot activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step. This is mainly how you're going to be able to add, because it does let you add Ancient Gear cards, right? Yeah. Normally what you'll do with this is you'll add your trap card, which is Ancient Gear Duel, and Ancient Gear Commander, or if Commander is already in your hand, you'll then add something else like Ancient Gear Box. And then you'll want to discard the Commander so that at any point you can banish the Commander to place the Ancient Gear Duel face up on your field. And then I also play 2 copies of Ancient Gear Golem. I'm mainly playing 2 copies of Ancient Gear Golem just because I can't find my Ancient Gear Ultimate Pounds, but I honestly prefer the original Golem over Ultimate Pound. Where Ancient Gear Golem just is a 3000 body that prevents your opponent from using spells or traps when it attacks, and it can inflict piercing. And that is it for the Ancient Gear monsters. Moving on to hand traps. I play 2 copies of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. This just lets you negate any card that would move a card from the graveyard by banishing, summoning, or returning to deck. Then I also played 2 copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. This card is an effect veiler whenever your opponent would special summon a monster. However, you can only do it once per turn. And then, basically your opponent special summons a monster, you discard it, target one of the special summon monsters, negate its effects, and then if it leaves the field, your opponent takes damage equal to its attack. And then I also play 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, just because Ash Blossom seems to be one of the better hand traps right now. Ash Blossom just has the effect where you can discard it to negate a card or effect, negate the activation of a card or effect that would add a card from deck to hand, send a card from deck to grave, or would summon from deck. And that is it for the monsters. Moving on to the spells. I play 2 copies of Lightning Storm. One thing I forgot to mention is that Ancient Gear is a blind go second deck, so you want to fill it with as many board breakers and hand traps as you can. Lightning Storm can only be activated if you control no face-up cards, but it lets you either destroy all your opponent's spell and trap cards or all your opponent's attack position monsters. Next, I play 2 copies of Ancient Gear Fusion. Ancient Gear Fusion is just a normal polymerization, but if you use an Ancient Gear Golem you control, then you can also fuse Ancient Gear monsters from your deck. And then next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Advance. Ancient Gear Advance has the effect that when it's activated, you can add an Ancient Gear spell or trap from your deck to your hand, except for another Ancient Gear Advance. And then once per turn, you contribute a monster, draw a card, and then you can apply this effect for the rest of the turn. We can normal summon Ancient Gear Golem or level 5 or higher monsters that mention it without tributing. And then you cannot set spells or traps to turn you to activate this effect. That last part is the main thing you're going to do with this is mainly just because you want to draw 1 card. Next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Fortress. Ancient Gear Fortress is one of the Ancient Gear cards I really like, but for no apparent reason, it's one of the most expensive Ancient Gear cards. At least when I got mine. Because when I got mine, they were like $15 to $20 a piece. But, which I'm pretty sure they've gone down since then, but Ancient Gear Fortress just makes it so that when an Ancient Gear monster is normal or special summoned that turn, it cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's monster effects. Or monster effects. During the turn in which an Ancient Gear monster is summoned, your opponent cannot target or destroy it with card effects. I don't know why I said monster effects the first time. And then its other effect is if it is destroyed, You can special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your hand or graveyard. You can use that effect of Ancient Gear Fortress once per turn, and I don't remember if it has a third effect. Let's see. Your opponent can activate cards. Okay. And its third effect is when your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to an Ancient Gear card, which that I absolutely love. So if this is in play, you can normal summon Wyvern. Your opponent can't respond, which I absolutely love it. And then next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Catapult. Ancient Gear Catapult can only be activated if you control no monsters. But what it does is it lets you target a face-up spell or trap on your field, destroy it, and if you do, special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning condition. And then if this card's in the graveyard, you can banish it to target a face-up spell or trap you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon an Ancient Gear token. However, I believe you can only use one of the 2 effects of Ancient Gear Catapult per turn. Let's see. Okay, you can only use one of those 2 effects per turn, so yeah. I can't remember if it was you can only use one of those per turn, or if it was during a turn which it wasn't set to grave. Anyway, I also play 3 copies of Gear Town. Gear Town has the effect that you can tribute summon Ancient Gear monsters with 1 less tribute, but the effect you really want is its effect of when it's destroyed, when this card in the field zone is destroyed, you can special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your deck. And to finish off these spells, I play 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Forbidden Droplet just lets you discard or send any number of cards from your hand or field to the grave to then non-targeting negate the effects and have the attack of monsters your opponent controls up to you're equal to the number of cards you sent. So also your opponent cannot respond with the same type of card as you send. So if you send a monster and a spell, your opponent can only respond with traps, or if you send a monster, spell, and trap, your opponent cannot respond at all. And the final card I play is 1 copy of Ancient Gear Duel, which, one thing I like about it is that it makes it so that your Ancient Gear Golem and monsters mentioning it, I believe. Okay, and your monster zones are unaffected by your opponent's activated monster effects, I believe. Which I actually really like, because that just means most of your monsters are immune to hand traps like Nibiru and Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler. However, they are still affected by cards like Infinite Impermanence. And another thing this lets you do is, if your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ancient Gear Golem, you can activate its effect to fusion summon a Ancient Gear Fusion monster, I believe, using that Golem. See fusion summon that mentions Ancient Gear Golem by mentioning monster from your field grave, including Ancient Golem you control. Okay, yeah, it lets you banish from your field or graveyard Ancient Gear monsters, including an Ancient Gear Golem you control. And then, if you do, that monster can make up to 3 attacks during each battle phase, which I absolutely like. Because you use that to make your Ancient Gear Megaton Golem or Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem and be guaranteed 3 attacks. And since they gain 600 attack points, Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem will be 5,000 attack, whereas Megaton Golem becomes a 3,900 attack body. But anyway, that is it for the main deck. Also, you can only use each effect of Ancient Gear Duel once per turn. You can only use that effect of Ancient Gear Duel once per turn. But the main thing I like about it is that it boosts all your Ancient Golems and monsters that mention it by 600, and makes all your Ancient Gear monsters unaffected. Or Ancient Gear. I can't remember if it's Ancient Gear monsters or monsters that mention Ancient Gear Golem. Where are you? There it is. Okay, it makes Ancient Gear Golem and your monsters that mention it unaffected by your opponent's activated monster effects. And for the extra deck is very simple for the moment, but I do plan on changing it a bit by adding more Link monsters, Sargus, and Spriggan's Merrymaker, I believe it was. I will also have put in a Regulus in the main deck. There's a couple of changes still need to make, but I need to figure out what the ratios I like are, so this is currently an experimental Ancient Gear build. So for Link monsters, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Ballista. Ancient Gear Ballista has the effect that when it's Link summoned, you can add an Ancient Gear monster or Gear Town from your deck to your hand. And then you can destroy 1 face-up spell trap, or I believe it has to be a face-up spell. Okay, you target a spell trap you control and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Destroy your target and then reduce that monster's attack to 0 until the end of the turn. This is mainly used so that you can get Gear Town, play it, and then immediately destroy it to summon another monster from the deck. Next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Howitzer. Ancient Gear Howitzer has the effect that's unaffected by other cards and effects. And then once per turn, you can activate its effect and inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. And if Ancient Gear Howitzer is destroyed, then it lets you special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring summoning conditions. This is mainly in here if you go into time, so you can summon a monster that can just inflict 1,000 damage. Oh yeah, and the last part of its effect is you can only use each effect of Howitzer once per turn. And unfortunately, Konami was smart enough to make it so that the burn effect was hard once per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Ancient Gear Megaton Golem. Megaton Golem gets a number of attacks during each battle phase equal to the number of Ancient Gear Golems and Ultimate Pounds used for its fusion summoning. Which, fun part about this is that it just requires 3 Ancient Gear monsters, so you don't even have to use a Golem to fusion summon it. But its last effect, besides the whole spells and traps can't be activated when it attacks, is that if it's destroyed, then you can special summon an Ancient Gear Golem, or an Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem from your extra deck, ignoring summoning conditions. Speaking of which, I also play 3 copies of Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem has the effect where it must be fusion summoned, and then the stereotypical Ancient Gear effect, spells and traps can't activate. It inflicts piercing damage, and then if it is destroyed, you can special summon an Ancient Gear Golem from your graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. However, normally, Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem is the monster you'll be summoning off of Ancient Gear Duel, just because of how Ancient Gear Duel makes it a 5,000 body that gets 3 attacks during each battle phase, with piercing, and your opponent can activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step. And lastly is one of my favorite Ancient Gear monsters, being Ancient Gear Chaos Giant. Chaos Giant has the effect where it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. It's unaffected by spells and trap cards. And during the battle phase, your opponent cannot activate monster effects. And it can inflict piercing damage. However, it must be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. I just like this card because the only spells and traps that can affect it are cards that affect the summon of the monster itself. An example being Power Bond. If you make this with Power Bond, it will be a 9,000 attack body that can attack everything with piercing. Yeah, that doesn't sound terrifying at all. But that is it for my Ancient Gear deck profile. If you have any ideas what I can do to improve the deck, any ideas decks like to see face each other, or decks you like to, or decks like to see be made in the future, feel free to comment down below, and thank you for watching.